Hi, how are you? I'm good. Well, I'm just trucking along.
Trucking along.
Good morning, Holly. I know, but did you dog?
All right. There we go. Good morning. Good morning, everyone. Welcome. I know more will be joining us as worship is ending up there. They'll be starting to come make their way down. We're glad you're here. As I said earlier, there's a special coffee hour over here, extra gifts that we had last night for our reception, so you get to have a little bit more this morning of that as well, so help yourself. Today we have with us Dr. Jacqueline Bussie from Concordia College. It's an ELCA college in Moorhead, Minnesota, and she is a professor of theology, and she is a theologian of our church, and she is here, and we've been talking about, last night we had kind of a book read with her, where she read her book on Love Without Limits, God's Radical Love in Jesus Christ. And so today she's going to talk a little bit more about that radical love. I've gotten to know her a little bit these last few days, and it has been a true privilege. And one, as a pastor who has 30 years invested in the love of church and God's people, to know that the next generation is being trained and taught the faith of God's radical love is truly a blessing for me anyway. And I am so thankful. And I'm thankful that she took time away from her family, from her school, to be with us. She left she came early because there was a blizzard up in Fargo and in Moorhead. And we're hopeful that she can get home. We haven't heard that she can. But there were no flights on Thursday and Friday. They were canceled after she finally got out. And so we're thankful she took the extra time to make her way here. But part of the blessing is that Dr. Bussie was born here in Ann Arbor. And so yesterday we spent some time going around seeing a childhood home and the church that she was baptized in. And it was a real blessing to walk with you on that little journey. So please welcome with me Dr. Jacqueline Bussie.
Well, thank you so much to Pastor Jim and Pastor Vicki for the invitation, and it's been just a wonderful couple of days to be here. So I'm just so grateful to be with you all this morning. So this morning, as Pastor Jim was saying, I'm going to offer some words from my book, which is called Love Without Limits, Jesus' Radical Vision for Love with No Exceptions. And in particular, when I've been touring on the book for the past year, I always get the same question from people, which is, how in the world can I love people who think, act, behave, believe, worship, vote, etc., different than I do? So, I have prepared a meditation for us this morning on two different quotes that are both about the idea of enemies. And then I'll offer some words on that, and then hopefully we can have some conversation. So, the two quotes that I would like to offer you meditation on this morning, one comes from the scripture, and one comes from a philosopher. But I think you'll see that they have a similar message. So the first comes from a philosopher named Zizek, who said this, a very powerful quote. He said, "Who is your enemy? Your enemy is only a person whose story you do not yet know." Very powerful. The other comes from Jesus in Matthew 5:43 through 47. And you've all heard this verse many times, I'm sure, but I'm using a different translation to kind of jazz it up so you can hear it anew. This is from the Message translation. Jesus says, "You're familiar with the old written law, love your friend, and its unwritten companion, hate your enemy. And I'm challenging that. I'm telling you to love your enemies. Let them bring out the best in you, not the worst. When someone gives you a hard time, respond with the energies of prayer. For then you are working out of your true selves, your God-created selves. This is what God does. God gives God's best. If all you do is love the lovable, do you expect a bonus? Anybody can do that." It's a great translation, isn't it? "If you simply say hello to those who already greeted you, do you expect a medal? Any run-of-the-mill sinner does that. In a word, what I am saying is, grow up. Live out your God-created identity. Live generously and graciously toward others the way God lives towards you. End quote. Okay. See what a difference it makes to just hear a different translation? It really is powerful. I find these words from Jesus so very challenging. How do we love people that we don't even like? That we find difficult to like at the very least? So I'm a storyteller, so I'm gonna start with a story that I feel like it's a story from my own life in which God really calls me out on this very issue of enemies. So 14 years ago, when I was a brand new teacher, I had a student who made my life less than wonderful. We're not supposed to admit that we have that as teachers, are we? But, it does happen. And his name was Darren Rodeo, and he was in my religion class. He definitely made my life less than wonderful. He was often disruptive. He enjoyed starting arguments. And worst of all, I think, for me as a person, was that on every political and social issue known to humanity, Darren and I stood on opposite sides of a barbed wire fence. And I knew this, and I'm sure that Darren knew that as well. I actually do not teach my class by force-feeding, my own perspective. We actually have a dialogue in the class. The chairs are always in a circle. But somehow Darren had figured out a lot of my views. And I knew this because he often sent me news segments from certain news channel that he wanted me to watch to correct any mistaken views that I might have. So having him in class, was difficult. I did watch the news segments. It was always very interesting. But the things that he said in class, to be serious, they really did often hurt my heart, and they often hurt the heart of his classmates, particularly his LGBTQ classmates. But the truth was that Darren was very intelligent. He actually was, in many ways, a good student. I just disagreed with him, right? So as much as I wanted to shut Darren down, I knew that I could not do that. So during the many weeks, it seemed as if the semester went on forever, I knew God wanted me to stretch love's bungee cord to reach Darren Rodeo, but even though I tried, it just kept breaking. It's okay, you can sit in the front row. Oh, you know what? I do not mind. All are welcome, come on in. And so though I tried, love's bungee cord did keep breaking on me. So I came up with a plan. I needed a strategy, right? So I decided that every day before I would walk into my classroom, I would go down the class attendance roster and I would pray for every student by name. And I would pray that God would teach me how to love them. I would say, God, please be with Rachel, Sarah, Darren today and help me to love her or him. Notice I didn't pray to like them. I was praying to love them. And each time I got to Darren's name, I struggled a bit, but I said the prayer anyway. And one day during my class attendance prayers ritual, a revelation struck me. And the revelation was the reason God made love a commandment and not a fun intramural option like beach volleyball or, flag football, was because of the Darren Rodeos in our lives. If love for the people who make our life less than wonderful was a choice, well, God knew we would never sign up for that. Love is not extracurricular. I like to say, love is not extracurricular, it's the curriculum. So the semester drew to a close, and I gave Darren the good grade that he had earned, and I was relieved, right? My thinking was, Darren Rodeo and I are better off apart. Sayonara, my friend, right? So the semester ended, And, you know, summer passed, and then the fall rolled around, and imagine my surprise when I got my class list for Christian ethics. And there it was, Darren Rodeo, the name of doom, on my class list again. And I couldn't believe these classes are optional, like you sign up for the professor you want. And I couldn't believe it. And halfway through the semester, though, something really unexpected happened. So Darren was always very talkative, and that particular day I remember distinctly we were discussing capital punishment, which I was sure that he would have a view on, and he did not speak at all. And he just sat silently staring down at his pen. And this really troubled me, like throughout the whole class session. Like I couldn't believe it. He never said anything. And so in spite of myself, you know, at the end of class, I had to ask. I said, Darren, are you okay? Is everything all right? And he mumbled a sort of yes, you know, and walked out of the room. I thought, oh, well, maybe he just doesn't have an opinion on this. So I gather up my things, as professors do, right? And I walk out into the hallway, and there stands Darren Rodeo, and he is sobbing his eyes out. And I'm like, Darren, what's going on? And he chokes through his tears. He says, Dr. Bussie, I had a huge fight with my stepsister just a few days ago. And I've been up all night because last night I got a call that she tried to take her own life last night, and she's in the ICU. And he continued on, and he said, and the reason that I am talking to you is because I did not know who else I could go to, and I knew that you would care. I gotta tell you, right? In that moment, I could admit for the first time that Darren Rodeo was super smart, and he was super right, because he knew so much that I didn't. And in particular, what he did know was that I did care about him. I did. Enough to stand in that hall, tears in my eyes for hours, and so many times after that, even to this day, but only because Darren Rodeo cared first, and he believed that I did too. So as you can tell, I was completely called out by this experience. And another thing that I learned was, I don't know if prayers change the world. I want to believe that prayers do change the world, but I can't guarantee you that, right? But one thing I can guarantee you, because it happened to me, is that prayers change the person who says them. And I know that because of my class attendance prayers, and because that day when I stood in the hallway with Darren Rodeo, my heart nearly broke out of love for him. An enemy is only a person whose story you have not yet heard. And in the end, as you can tell, it's kind of funny that I called Darren my student, right? Because really, he was my teacher. He reminded me that at my worst, I am fully capable of allowing difference of political opinion, social issues opinion, to eclipse our shared humanity. Clearly, I'm totally capable of that, right? Ouch. But Darren also taught me that at my best, I am completely capable with God's grace of compassion and care across chasms of difference. I'm completely capable of that too. Loving those we like, it feels so easy, doesn't it? It's like slipping into our favorite pair of comfy jeans. It's so great. And loving those that we don't like as much. Often, it's like trying to fit a pair of baby Gap jeans onto a hippo. Right? So the ethicist, the Christian ethicist that I quoted earlier in this sermon, I'm going to quote him again because he's just so wise. The famous Christian ethicist Reinhold Niebuhr has something really beautiful to say about love that I wanted to share with you. He says, love, you know what love is? He says, love is the impossible possibility. Isn't that great? Love is the impossible possibility. And I think when Niebuhr preached those words, he understood how hard it is to love the people who don't think, act, dress, worship, vote, believe like we do. These are the folks that most of us, at least sometimes, mark with love's little asterisks. Either by our thought, secret thought maybe, or by our actions. We reason, when God commanded love the whole world, no exceptions, God couldn't have meant them, right? I mean, really? You know, like the people who stole the van? Right? Earlier, Pastor Jim made a really powerful comment because he knew what I was going to be talking about today. And he was like, you know, God loves them, the people who stole the van. And I'm like, yeah, that's my message, right? There's people who like, you're just like, you're driving me crazy. I think it does make a difference if we say to ourselves, God loves them just as much as God loves me. Isn't that frustrating? God's love is just so scandalous. So when will we realize only love and never agreement? Only love and never agreement will unite us. That's the only thing we got. So who is your Darren Rodeo? Unless I'm the only one who has one. Who in your life do you find hard to like sometimes, let alone love? Who have you been taught, perhaps just by our society, is your enemy? Do you believe it? How are you going to treat the people who make your life less than wonderful? You don't need me to tell you. We are living in one of the most polarized and divided times in history. And if you actually look at the Pew Research, you're not imagining it, it's actually true. If you look at the statistics of people nowadays who say, I would be distraught if my child or anyone in my family married someone of a different political party, the number, it's astronomical, and it's not at all the same as it was a decade ago, or 20 years ago, or 30 years ago. It's not your imagination. We are actually angrier, and we are more divided. If you feel that in your bones, you are actually right. It seems we've decided if we disagree, we must reject and demonize and insult and otherize each other. But as I say every day, understanding and agreement are not the same thing. They never were. And love, true love, genuine love, demands only the first and never the second. And the other day I heard someone say something so powerful I wanted to share with you. Does anybody know the commentator Van Jones? Right, he's amazing, right? Van Jones, the other day, I was at a conference called Revolutionary Love. He was speaking, and he said, he just got so frustrated, all of a sudden he just said, you know what? We've been tricked into hating each other. And I was like, amen, yes we have. But you know, that's not a trick that you have to fall for anymore. That's not a trick that I have to fall for. Darren Rodeo showed me we don't have to. We can love each other even when we don't love or share each other's ideas, opinions, or choices. Now, I don't think that doesn't mean that we shouldn't try to change one another's minds, right? Or engage in activism, particularly against systems of oppression and injustice, which are undergirding our society. I don't think it means that. It doesn't mean quietism. I am not up here preaching quietism. That'd be the last thing I'd be doing, right? But I do think it means that we just have to remember what Pastor Jim had said. God does love them too. The person whose heart and mind we might be hoping to change someday is still a person created in the image of God, and God loves them without limits. It's hard to accept sometimes, I know. But Jesus rejected outright the category of enemies. I love how for Jesus, the category of enemies is completely obsolete. It's like an answering machine. Right? We don't have those anymore. Right? We don't have answering machines. This is how Jesus feels about the category of enemies. Passé. Gone. Those who say I love God and hate their brother or sister are liars. 1 John 4:20. Those who say I love God and hate their brother or sister are liars. And in Luke 6:27, Jesus said, but I say to you that listen, love your enemies. Jesus held hands with lepers, as we heard today in the gospel, partied with prostitutes, shared hummus with outcasts, and praised outsiders like Samaritans as the people that we insiders need to be learning from. Because of Jesus' outlandish love without limits, the Roman Empire declared Jesus public enemy number 1 and executed him. And in our particular culture moment, I want us to remember one of the major points that I see in Jesus' execution on the cross, and it's one that we forget, I think. If the cross teaches us anything today, perhaps it should also be this. We are often dreadfully wrong about who we believe our enemies to be. And so I challenge you this morning. Leave this place, find one of your so-called enemies this week. Ask them to tell you their story. Actually listen. Challenge yourself to find their shared humanity. And remember the wise words that I once heard said, everyone's blood is red, and everyone's tears are salty. Let yourself be called out by the God who loves without limits. Thank you. Thank you. Can someone remind me how much time we have?
Yes.
We have a little more time?
Oh, sure. You have about 15, 20 minutes?
Perfect. Okay, good, because I need to hear from you, and I know you're tired of hearing my voice all morning. So this is the time. I'm not going to say that we're opening it up for questions and answers, because we all know that I don't have the answers, but we certainly can open it up for questions and comments, and I would certainly love to hear yours. So what do you got? Don't be shy. Thank you so much. And in the back, if you would say your name. Is that okay?
Bernadette.
Bernadette. Thank you, Bernadette.
I just wanted to thank you for this is a great topic, and I'm frequently around people who are just I don't
Yeah, you have to.
People can't hear you. Sorry, everybody can't hear you, Bernadette. I apologize.
Okay.
They asked me to bring it to you,
Okay.
so they can hear you. You're very wise. Let's hear it.
I like what you said about prayer may not change the world, but it changes the person who said it. And I'm not that political, but I'm around people who are just incensed by what's happening and are constantly spewing like junk about
Yeah, we all
our
know
current
that.
POTUS, and I just don't know what to do about. I mean, just praying is fine, but like, what else can you do about it? I'm sick of hearing about it, even though I don't disagree. This is a sort of a different thing.
Yeah.
You were talking about agreement. You You don't have to agree. This is a thing where I don't disagree, I just don't like the way it's coming out of this particular individual. So what do I do?
We'll let Marge answer, she knows.
I just ran across it in a couple of days, and I was going to ask you that there is a book out by a gentleman that I'm not familiar with called When to Walk Away. And I wondered if you were familiar with
I'm
it.
not.
Okay.
I wish I was.
Okay, and I'm not, so I don't know whether it's a good answer. But it's erudite. But to be, did you refer in the 9 o'clock service to C.S. Lewis?
I did.
Okay, let me tell you, today, I read C.S. Lewis every day. I do not understand him.
Nobody does.
I'm an interpreter most of the time, but I love him, and I love what he says, and sooner or later, much of what he says will finally come to me in the right way. Today, he says, many things, such as loving, going to sleep, or behaving unaffectedly, are done worst when we try the hardest to do them. I thought it was a beautiful, a beautiful summary of what you're trying to say, but not to give up on those things that we believers know that work. You know, we had good old Adam. So if we want to point the finger at somebody, we started right there. We point to Adam. He did all this. And secondly, Jesus taught us the way to salvation. It wasn't by hating anyone. It wasn't by disagreeing with anyone. It was by believing and obeying what that word says. And if we're not going to the word, practicing the principles that got us where we are, we don't have a prayer. I don't care how you want to identify yourself. God put each and every one of us on this earth for a purpose. I may not like his purpose for you, but that wasn't of my doing. I don't and I can't change it. So sometimes I don't know what we're talking about.
Mic drop there.
I'll let my lips and go home if you like.
That's great.
Who else would like to share?
Anybody else have a comment? It's back.
So this morning, as I was reading this other book that I've got going on, and it talks about how everything is energy, right? And so just like radiation can be damaging to our cells and to our bodies, you have the Fukushima plant or Chernobyl, right? It really hurts us. Well, love is energy. So if we can surround people that we love, or with our love, we can change the energy in a space. So when you're around people who you maybe don't agree with, it's still, if you just send out that energy of love, you might not change their beliefs, but you're changing the energy in that space that's around you. And we all have, it's like a superpower, right? We all have this superpower of love in us to do this, to change the energy around us by just being the loving person that we can be. We can always create our own little space and hopefully share it with others.
And on top of that, one of the things Danielle taught me this week is when you're in each other's personal space, the bubble, you share energy. So if I'm in her bubble and she's emitting love, I can't help but to feel that love. So just spew love. Baby.
Okay.
I found the negative is very draining.
Yes.
Okay? And it takes energy from you, and
tries to deplete the love of the Holy Spirit and fill it with. So the best thing you can do when someone keeps at it and at it and at it, and you do care about them, you do love them, just say, you know, I understand what you're saying, and I agree with you, but right now, I just think we need to change the subject and talk about something else, because it's just not, I can't do this anymore. I have to change the subject. My own well-being. Leave it at that.
Yeah. Can I comment on that?
I do think that that's so helpful. All of the responses have been so helpful to Bernadette. It's really powerful and difficult question that I think none of us can answer just sort of quickly with a quick and easy solution. But it does make me think about, how can I say this? And I like your point about, you're talking about people you agree with, that you still feel like they're getting caught up in the toxicity, right? And so that's a bit of a different situation. But I like the solution of being able to name it and just saying, does this feel toxic to you? And kind of what I was preaching about earlier, if some of you were there, it is so painful to realize the ways in which we begin to do the very things that we despise when we're trying to take a stand against it. That's what we do, right? And it sounds to me like your people, because they're my people and they're sometimes me, right? We're falling into the toxicity that we hate and we're perpetuating it and creating more circles of toxicity, right? On the other hand, I think people really should take a stand for justice when they see something happening, right? So it's a very tricky balance here. But one of the things that it does make me think about is the author Thich Nhat Hanh. If anyone's ever read anything by him, he is just incredible on this sort of thing. And he wrote a book called Living Buddha, Living Christ, in which he does some comparisons about Christ and the Buddha, you know, distinctions, but also some amazing, powerful similarities. And one of the things that Thich Nhat Hanh talks about is somebody asked him one day, a young girl was struggling with her father, and her father was very unkind and abusive and all these kinds of things. And she had said to Thich Nhat Hanh, she said, what can I do, you know, to change my dad? It's so painful, it's not really safe for me to be around him. And Thich Nhat Hanh acknowledged that sometimes we're just not safe around other people, right? And then we also just have to admit that. To love without limits is not to live without limits, right? As I like to say. And so then what did Thich Nhat Hanh recommend to the young girl? He said, well, when you're alone, why don't you think about, is there any part of your father that lives within you that you'd like to change? So notice how the reversal is, you know, you're talking so much about why don't they change, or why don't they stop, or why don't they do this? And then reversing it, which I think the gospel also asks us to do, is to say, but what part of that am I doing? What contribution am I making to that? So kind of that mirror image, holding up that mirror to ourselves and to one another to be like, well, am I doing anything that's equally toxic as that? Because perhaps I am, right? Which doesn't mean we stop naming other toxicities that we see and actions that we think are unjust, but it just means also, what is my participation in it? And I think that kind of honesty really matters. Yeah, yes. Oh, so, comments from both Marge and Bernadette.
Yeah. Is there another?
Marge goes first.
Okay.
No, when we are asked to do this self-analysis and look at things, my fear is, and I probably am wrong and can be righted, that we are being asked to walk away from much of what we have learned and that Jesus has said and the Bible says, and we do not have at our fingertips the adequate response that isn't viewed or really doesn't come out as I put it down. Okay?
Yeah.
It's when someone asks me to walk away from my basic theological beliefs, then my tongue gets ahead of my brain.
Right.
Feel compromised.
And as everyone knows, I have trouble locking my lips.
You told me that last night, but you did. You came clean on that, but Bernadette,
Comment? So, I'm a lot like her. I ran across.
Be careful.
I keep this in my wallet. There's a person that, her name is Byron Katie, B-Y-R-O-N. And she has this thing called The Work. And it's where you ask yourself, like if you have a thought that's like just driving you, you ask yourself, is it true, this thought that you're thinking? Can you absolutely know that it's true? These are questions you ask yourself. How do you react? What happens when you believe that thought? And then the last one is, who would you be without the thought? And then you turn it around. So it's just, I look it up. It's kind of interesting stuff because it's like sometimes you're thinking things like you don't know. You really don't know. Yeah.
Yeah. But we have that book called the Bible.
Yeah. Right. No?
You? Okay, there we go.
It's just something brief. You know, there's toxicity everywhere, either all sides of the aisle. And sometimes you feel like if you don't say something is wrong, then you're perpetuating the lies.
Right.
And I feel like it's very conflicting because I don't want to pick a fight with people. It just creates a lot of anger. But I feel that what has helped me a lot is that when I feel something is wrong and it's something that is done to a group of people, I just try to help that people, and by helping them, I feel like maybe I don't have the strength to combat this evil, but maybe I can do something to help the people that are at the receiving end of that evil.
It's beautiful. Thank you. Yes, sir.
How would you say you can balance like love? Just thinking of someone with addiction, for example, like there's love and then there's boundaries, and you have to. I think you mentioned like living differently than you love, because like how do you balance that so that you're providing love without letting them take advantage of you?
Yeah. Oh, and what is your name?
Jake.
Jake.
Good
$1
question.
million question, right? I do have a chapter in my book dedicated to this. It is not I'm saying that I have answers again, but I am discussing it because I feel it's so important. It's important in just in my own life story because I grew up in a household of abuse. And so my mother was very abused, right? And then one wonders, as you get older, why didn't that situation change? You know, why didn't she leave, etc. Those kinds of things. So those questions, I think, are extremely important. So in my writing and my praying and my musing, one of the things I'm really struck by is, of course, Jesus' commandment to love your neighbor as yourself. And growing up, I always heard that as like, of course you love yourself, so go out and love other people that much. Right? So the assumption is that everyone is egotistical. Everyone loves themselves, right, in that particular interpretation. And so they're going to go out and, you know, what we need to learn is how to love other people. I think Jesus is smarter than that by the way that he phrases it. Because Jesus also understands that some people, we just heard it today in the gospel, some people like Samaritans, everyone is learning in Jesus' day that that's the enemy. That's the outsider, that's the enemy. What about the lepers? Ooh, don't talk to them. Don't touch them. Right? So Jesus has this understanding that not everyone is taught to love themselves equally. Not everyone, because our society, sadly, doesn't function equitably like that. Some people are lifted up. Some people grow up and they love themselves, right? Not everyone grows up, say for example, in a house of abuse. But if you do, maybe you think of yourself as less than. You think of yourself as not good enough. The world is, and believe me, I'm a teacher, and when you teach theology, people come to you with their stuff. And it is so heavy, what 18 to 22-year-olds have gone through. whether it's sexual assault or so many things, right? And I know you know that. But they do not, so many of my students, they don't love themselves. They're wearing a name tag that says less than, not good enough. And if we teach them, oh, you need to be more selfless and you need to go out there and, love other people as much as you love themselves, they look at me like, oh, I don't know how to even do that. So what Jesus is saying, I think in Jesus' love without limits is, don't forget yourself. And if your love includes yourself genuinely, and you are loving yourself as much as maybe you already love other people, because some people are really good at that. Some people love other people more than they love themselves. Am I right? There are people like that. Not everyone is the same. And that's why Jesus' commandment can go cut either way, right? And so I think it's very powerful to think about for those of us who maybe have not always learned to love ourselves. The ways in which, if you do that, that is going to mean that you draw lines in your life because you're finally included. Like that treatment over there, no, I do have to walk away from that. Let's say it's a situation of abuse. I'm just using that as an example. So that's what I meant when I just mentioned love without limits does not mean to live without limits. Because if your love truly includes yourself, there's going to be boundaries that other people will experience as very painful. So, and I say, if you want to know more of what I think about it, you can read the book. There's an entire chapter, so that's a little synopsis. But thank you, Jake. It's such an important question. How are we doing on time? We good? 2 more minutes. Did you have a final comment right there?
Real quick.
Yes.
I was in a car accident and the guy hit me and killed my cousin's brother. My cousin knew that hit me. And he was on palliative staff. And look, I'm not treating that hate, but I should look at him. I mean, I realize and I'm confident. Yeah, I thought you can't be doesn't love me, but well, he is dead now. But it's hard to well, it's just I don't have time. But yeah, it's hard to reciprocate when people love me, I should love them. But I feel like, well, this happens to me. And they don't love me then. So
Jesus will judge.
yeah, that's what I tell myself.
Yeah.
Is that God knows, God will take care of it.
Yeah.
And so I can believe, because who knows what happens. But I'm very confident in that. And I've gone since '84 by accident. And well, I'm not liking yet. I mean,
Yet.
you don't know.
Yeah, you don't.
We'll see. But I'm not bitter at anyone. But you just go around. Like today, I'm going to a funeral for a therapist who was working with me psychologically. And one night, the 11th happened. She helped out there. She flew out there to help. Well, she ended up dying of cancer from out there, the dust or something. but in the last years, Dan, the psychologist, has been kind of weird. Now I know why. But that's, no, I mean, she was a good person. Yeah, I mean, God loves us and forgives us all. But you just have to stand back and realize that it changes. And God loves you no matter.
That is the perfect conclusion. Thank you for your powerful testimony. God loves us no matter. Yeah. Thank you so much to everybody for the great conversation and for inviting me here today. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Bussie. Colleen has told me we have 3 books left over from last night that are for sale. Dr. Bussie's Love Without Limits. They are autographed, and they're $20. So if you want one, there's one over there. We might be down to 2. Anyway, but please, thank you. There's some more goodies over here before we put them away. If you want to have a little snack. But please.
Oh,